Hello and welcome to Exponential Potential. And it's been an incredible year so far. It's not over yet, but it's definitely been moving fast. And as you know, Jen and I have created this series to really examine different ways that we can help you to thrive in times of great change. And when we set out on this journey 2 years ago, who'd have thought there'd be as much change as there is? But it's such a vibrant time to be alive, and throughout our conversations, we try to bring that through. This month, we're focusing in on the topic of leadership, and it's an absolute passion of mine in terms of good leadership and how leadership can help individuals and communities within businesses and communities outside businesses to grow. So I absolutely adore this topic and work quite extensively with different leaders. But it's also a brilliant reason to bring through other experts, like our guest today, Aneace Haddad, who is who's an author, kind of first and foremost, as well as a transformation coach, really working alongside experienced leaders. And hi, Eddie. It's really
Hi,
before we
Claire.
dive into yeah.
Great to meet
So,
you. Great to see you this morning.
yeah. Thank you. I'm really curious about our conversation today, and I think curiosity will come through as a theme for sure. As I introduce you, because you've had quite a varied life story to bring you
Uh,
to this point. Originally as a CEO of a tech company, and now kind of specialing in those more human interventions. Uh, so, uh, so perhaps kind of introduce, maybe introduce yourself to the audience. What's
yeah.
your story?
Okay. The 30-second version or the 60-second version of that can be quite long. Um, so, yeah, so I'll start from where you left off there. Originally a programmer, software engineer some 40 years ago, and then I became a tech entrepreneur. Built a payment software company in the south of France in the late 90s, early 2000s, grew it to 30 countries, and then sold it in 2007, just before the global financial crisis. I thought I was going to be a serial entrepreneur because I thought there wasn't anything else I knew how to do in the world. But I discovered that I liked people more. I discovered that I was most proud of the teams that we had created, the people going off and becoming CEOs, CTOs, CFOs of other companies, and I found that that was really what I found most fulfilling in all those years. So that realization, coupled with some introspection after the company was sold, trying to figure out what could I have done better during those years. I'd made some big mistakes as a CEO. There were things that worked really well, others not. So all of that jumbled process together, uh, I came out of that transformed as an executive coach, leadership facilitator. So it was a big transition late in life. I was 50 when that was really processed. 47 when the company was sold. By 50, I had kind of become kind of who I am today. So that's the 30-second version. Originally, I'm from the US. I've been in Singapore 17 years. I was in France 20 years. My name is Arabic. My father's from Iraq. My mother's American. By the time I was 21, I had spent half my life overseas, already spoke French fluently. So I've lived a whole life of just things changing and nothing is really fixed. And I think
Yeah,
that's really a big part of we were chatting briefly just
yeah,
before you record. I think that's a big driver on what produced the book, and
mm,
there's a lot of change today, and I feel like it was just like I've been in that space forever. So that that's where
yeah.
that's coming from, I think.
So let's bring in the book, as it were, the eagle that drank hummingbird nectar, and I'm so pleased that you gave your context at that point, and your history, and your, kind of how you grew up, how you've grown as a child, then as an adult, because the title in its own right, and the approach that you've taken is so different from other business books. This is a book about leadership. It's a book that's written as a novel, not as a how to boss, how to sell like crazy. So, perhaps what inspired you to write in that way?
I had published two books in the payment space some 20 years ago. Um, and after I had made the transition to what I do today, I naturally wanted to write a book in the area that I'm familiar with now: leadership, coaching, executive transformation, and all that, senior C suite transformations. Um, so I wrote a book and I found it immensely boring. It's just kind of a typical how to, what I've learned, and all that. It's just, and I thought, that's not even what coaching and leadership facilitation is about. It's not imparting knowledge and teaching skills. It really is about, my life work now is about helping people find their own wisdom that comes from within. And it's not me giving it to them. So then it was like, okay, this goes in the trash. And really, the best way that I can think of to convey transformation that's not in a teaching way is through fiction. So people can take away the wisdom that resonates emotionally with them through the characters in the novel. So that was a process that was very conscious in order to not be in a teachy kind of mode. Um,
Mm.
I have a teachy voice that comes out and that needs to be kind of beaten back every once in a while. I had three different writing coaches over a period of 2 years, and then I remember one, her voice is still in my head. You're teaching. She would point out a place, and I'm going, no, I'm telling a story. And it really helped me to kind of see how that voice is so ubiquitous, and learn to kind of move it out of the way so that people can hear their own voices more easily. I,
Yeah.
I, that makes sense. I don't know if I'm describing that.
No, because what I what resonates for me in that description is how important storytelling and the ability to craft a narrative that engages, that grips people, that they can relate to. It's far more empowering than tools are, to be honest.
Yeah,
Um, and yet, kind of in any media feed, there are a million experts and gurus who say this is the way, this is the way, this is the
yeah,
way,
yeah,
and they give you a toolkit, but actually they don't help you to evolve. They don't really necessarily help you get to those first
yeah,
principles of change, that apply within your context, within your life, within
yeah,
kind of all of your baggage and your bias and the community that you serve. And so
yeah,
it's a hugely potent vehicle.
yeah. Absolutely. It touches on, in a very subtle way, this distinction between things happen to me and I make things happen. So it's the things happen to me, we fall into that mindset easily, and that leads us to feeling like a victim. Not necessarily that big of a victim, but sometimes when we're upset, we're angry, we're frustrated, things happen to me. I make things happen is more creative, we're in charge, and all that. And if you think about it, there are so many subtle ways that as a leader, we can be disempowering with our people by implying that things can happen to them. And writing a book on how to be a leader is absolutely in that space. It's implying that it needs to come from outside. You don't have it. You need to learn the principles. And that is, if you really unpack that, that is disempowering, because the implication is that it's not arising from within you. And I've become very sensitive to the subtle ways that we can be disempowering of ourselves and others through those kinds of things. So that's why the novel, to me, it's not perfect. The novel construct is not perfect, but it goes a lot further to enabling that empowering to happen and the person to take their own. It taps into their own wisdom. They relate to something, they resonated with it because they have it within them, as opposed to their learning something from outside.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And one of the core elements that you described is change and resistance to change on that kind of personal level. Um, and it's something that I see very often, especially within corporate environments. There's many executives who are often resistant to change.
Yeah.
Of course, they don't present in that way to their bosses.
Yeah.
But actually, when you look at the behaviours underneath
Yeah.
it, there's like pure resistance there. How does the book, kind of tackle this area of
Yeah.
resistance, and what advice do you impart? Given that it still applies to disempowering and
I notice how you just caught yourself. I love that. It's such a there's no reason to change if there's no reason to change. I know that sounds really silly, but it's really when the person wants something new and different that they're not getting through their current way of being, that change becomes inevitable, and they embrace it at that point. But it's that desire, and that burning desire for that new state. And the old state has tremendous attraction, especially as a very senior leader. When you've spent 30 years building up your expertise, your contacts, your networks, you're known in the industry, people invite you to come and speak at conferences around the world, and then you let go of it. It's very scary to let go of that. And so you start holding on to what you know best out of natural human need. And it's only when that desire for something new and different that the desire for change comes. I have an example in my book that came from a real coaching session around 10 years ago. It was the managing director of a textile company in India. They were having accidents, and they had a few fatalities, and they had spent a lot of money on creating the dashboards and having all the safety stuff in place, hiring international consultants to do the change management around safety and all that, but still they had these incidents that were happening. So I was coaching him, and I'm not a safety person. I don't know anything about textile factories, even less so textile factories in India. But we looked at I asked him, what's your commitment? How would you rate your commitment from 1 to 10 to safety? And he said it's very high, probably a 9. And what that revealed in that conversation was the possibility that maybe there was something missing. So why did you say 9? And I said, well, you can always be better. Nobody's perfect. You can't be perfect. And then I suggested, well, maybe it's not. Maybe people are dying because it's just off by 1 digit. It's 9 instead of 10. He got angry with me at first. He said, I can't be 100% committed to safety because people do crazy things. Most of them are uneducated. The shop floor is very long. Somebody wants to get from one end to the other, and they'll see a forklift going past. They'll jump on the forklift. They know they're not supposed to. They're stupid. I can't stop them from doing that. I can't be on everyone's back. So, but it stayed with him. And a few weeks later, he was on the shop floor, and an elderly janitor fell and twisted his ankle. He stopped to help him. And then he's relating this to me at our next coaching session. He was really excited. He said, I stopped and helped him. I put my jacket under his head as a pillow, called for the safety people to come, and all of that was my normal 9 out of 10. But I started thinking, what would 10 look like in this case? So he decided he would. So the safety people came. The guy was all right. He just had a twisted ankle. He just needed to go home and rest. So the CEO got him in his car, drove him home personally, and got him into the door, made sure that he was safe at home, sat and had tea with the man and his wife, made sure that she would not let him get up and walk around. And he was really excited. He said that was a 10 for him. And he would not have gone looking for that on his own. That's not, he wasn't like, oh, I want to change. Let me see. He was resisting that. But that burning desire to stop having the accidents and figure out once and for all, why is that happening? What can he do? How can he take full? These senior executives want to take full responsibility. And when they see that missing, it moves. So that was transformative. I mean, you've seen that kind of thing. His people change. They see that, and everything changes. So it really has to come from within. It's not going to come from without. They have someone. You have to be courageous enough to go look for that. If you really want it, you'll find it, and the change will come easily.
Mm. And there are so many elements in how you answered that question. So, kind of one of the traits that can come through, particularly for senior leaders, is, and it's not a conscious shift, but almost a dehumanizing of people around you, because things get distilled to politics or
Yeah,
patterns or resources, and it's a way of handling complexity.
yeah,
Is that kind of, well, these people, as they it's not intentionally insulting. It's right, okay, I need to control, I need to manage, and I have all
yeah,
these different moving parts, and sometimes you lose the human
yeah,
connection, that desire to kind of alleviate pain and suffering, that
yeah,
desire to feel loyalty, and that moment, you know I can imagine, in terms of the organization, how quickly that spread
yeah.
as a
I
story, and
love
how
that
quickly
you.
it built trust. And
Yeah, I love that you connected it that way. That's exactly it. It's rehumanizing.
mm,
There's so many times I've done workshops with top teams where you go through some courageous introductions, authentic introductions. They get in the front of the room and they share something personal. And the number of times that they'll come away saying, "This is the first time I've seen my colleagues as human beings and not roles, not
mm,
titles in the organization," and that instantly shifts everything. That's spot on with what you just caught there.
mm.
That's
Yeah,
exactly what was happening there.
yeah, and also, we're talking about the relationship with colleagues, or with different team members, and particularly in those areas of service. So I've managed large healthcare organisations, and within local government serving communities, the disconnect between a senior executive and the person that they serve is often even greater, and you kind of lose this grip of, not reality, it's there, it's kind of a foundation of who they are, really, but through the busyness, through everything else, it gets
Yeah.
lost. Mm.
I was having a
And
conversation last week with a senior C-suite executive who wanted to become better at influencing stakeholders. so shareholders and people like that. And he was going through quite a complex process of thinking through that. And then I asked him, what keeps these people awake at night? What is it that really that concerns them the most? And he had never thought of that. And that instantly, that question, what keeps them awake at night, instantly had him think differently of these people. Rather than, I want to influence them, it's like realizing I don't know what keeps them awake at night. I need to learn that. It's more this way
Yeah.
than, yeah, than pushing. It's more that I need to
Yeah.
work on myself, not in order to influence them. I need to be influenced by them. I need to understand them, empathize with them.
Yeah.
Otherwise, there is no influence. You're just trying to, you're going back to the teaching thing as opposed to inspiring.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And yeah, we talked earlier as well about kind of the many different hats that I play, and one of them is around teaching strategy to global audiences, and working that through with them. And it's a trait that I see so often. It, it's when we've become so obsessed with efficiency and productivity and and kind of relationship management or stakeholder management, we we're still at this very superficial level of connecting and leading. And you really need to get in underneath that, both in terms of the teams that you lead, but also being, creating a brand, a connection that people are loyal to,
Mm,
fiercely loyal, that they'll spend the money that you do on an iPhone, or
yeah,
have a team that would walk through fire because kind of they've got that, and you that doesn't come from a book, it doesn't come from a template, it doesn't come
yeah,
from an algorithm, it comes from a, a presence, a
yeah,
stillness and a presence.
yeah.
Yeah. Oh, this is really just genius, just genius. Um, and one of the mechanisms that you use, and I can see that comes through in your examples from coaching individuals, and also your approach to the novel. But there's something quite important around the questions that you
Mm.
ask to create that space. So I was like, I'm trying to think of a smart question to talk about powerful questions. But kind of, I'm guessing that this use of questions is something that you've relied on, you've built up
Yeah.
over time. Personal.
Yeah. And a big part of that is kind of a natural toolkit for coaching. You learn to ask powerful. It's part of the ICF process for certification. That's one of the things you need to tick, asking powerful questions. I see I see an angle today that's growing very fast is that on a massive scale with things like ChatGPT, we're learning that we need to get pretty good at asking questions. Because with ChatGPT, that's really you're honing your skill of asking questions. Because how you ask your question, you get different stuff coming back from that from AI.
Yeah.
Um, so we're kind of like in a. I find it interesting and curious that we're kind of like in a mass learning process of becoming better at questions. And it links back to the founder of ontological coaching, which is the type of coaching that I'm trained in. Julio Lala, I don't know if you've ever heard of him. He's a Brazilian. He founded onto this concept called ontological coaching. And he had a saying, um, knowledge is a love affair with answers. Wisdom is a love affair with questions. And I've always loved that because it's like, and that fits perfectly with where we're going with AI, is that AI is answers. It's got a huge amount of answers. And if our value comes from finding answers, our value is going to go down really fast. So our value needs to come from the questions that we pose.
Yeah.
And the more intriguing and the more difficult to answer those questions are, the more powerful they are. Whether they're questions about our, like 9 out of 10, what does your 10 out of 10 commitment to safety look like? There's no textbook answer to that. It's a hard question. And it's fascinating. I'm very optimistic to see that as a species, we're so involved in getting better at asking those questions just because it's fun using ChatGPT to ask good questions to.
You can see the programming side coming through. It's like, yeah, but it is true, isn't it? And also how important it is to learn the skill of critical decision making.
Yeah,
Critical consumption of media,
yeah,
and being
yeah,
curious around how data triangulates, or where this could go next. And I'm guessing in your work with individuals as well, when you ask those questions, you're often surprised at what the answer comes back as
yeah.
once you hold that space. And could you perhaps give us another example?
What's an example of that? Oh, I can't. It's hard for me to find one right this moment. Um, there are a lot. Okay. Another conversation with the CEO. Who started a conversation quite frustrated with his people, saying, I don't understand why they don't take ownership. I'm giving them all the tools for them to take full ownership and accountability and all that, and they're not taking full ownership and accountability. And I asked him, so how do you feel about that? And I guess I'd asked him that because I couldn't tell, was he feeling frustrated? It felt like there was something different than just frustration and anger at them. But I wasn't sure. I didn't know what would be there. So I asked, so how do you feel about that? And he was silent for a while. And then he said, I feel guilty, which surprised me because that wasn't the emotion that was coming out and the surface. So then when we scratched at that a bit, guilt is, I mean, guilt is I'm doing something that's creating that situation in which they're not able to. But he couldn't put it into words until he identified that emotion. Once the emotion, the feeling was identified, then we could unpack ways that he was creating disempowerment with his people, um, talking too much about external factors, the market, um, COVID, shareholders, Ukraine. There's so many opportunities to talk about external stuff.
Yeah.
And he discovered that maybe he was doing a bit too much of that. So he knew intuitively that he himself was being disempowering, and hence it was triggering a feeling of guilt. So it's always it's really amazing when these answers come up that are not expected.
Mm. And kind of flipping from the external to the internal, yeah, actually, when there is so much uncertainty and so many businesses and leaders are kind of shifting to survival tactics because of all these external changes,
Yeah,
um, I can see how powerful it can be to say, look, you can't control that. What you can control is how people show up, how safe they feel within their workplace, how committed they are, how they grow.
yeah,
Um, how and I can see that that's a really strong element of the book as well.
yeah,
How do you go beyond that survival um, trait, or kind of
yeah.
the survival tactics towards rejuvenation, and then to
Yeah.
soar from there?
I think as human beings, we generally do that quite well when we're left to our own devices. we, I mean, we don't get it perfectly, but I mean, we populated the whole the whole planet. We've done quite well generally at staying quite optimistic and positive. We do get quite negative, and we get quite mean to each other and all that stuff. Obviously, I don't want to discount
Mm.
that. But there's so many powerful stories. All of the things that came out of the Second World War, the stuff on resilience that comes through. I think we have so much of that in us. We bounce back generally so well. It's more a matter of reconnecting that with that
Yeah.
energy inside, as opposed to learning something new.
Mm.
I've always been struck with how much complexity people deal with in their personal lives that eclipses the complexities that are at work. You have, I remember doing a workshop once. The One of the younger women who seemed frail, petite, and all that, she wasn't even high up in the organization when it was her turn to speak in front of her colleagues. And she talked about uh, her in-laws living with her and her husband. She was from Eastern Europe. Her in-laws living with her and her husband, and who had been through dementia, and the husband had passed away, and now the wife had just passed away, and now her parents were going through that, and they were going to be moving in. She has been carrying this weight on her, and she didn't look. She was managing it with such grace and strength, and everybody heard this, and her stature just shot up when people saw how much she has to deal with in her personal life, and she's not dealing with it looking like she's really under tremendous weight. She's dealing with it with a lot of grace and resilience. And I've seen that over and over again. The stuff that people deal with, kids going through addictions, there's suicides in the families. There's so much stuff that just eclipses the complexity we have in the office.
For sure, and we put it that way. We are far more resilient than you realise, than it kind of give yourself credit for.
Yeah,
Once you create the space and acknowledge that. But yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, so the last question I have for you today then is really around, for you, what do you what do you most hope for when readers,
Mhm.
dive into the book?
Yeah. My biggest hope is that they come away looking at all the change that they will go through and have gone through, looking at it with much more lightness, um, and and joy, and just kind of an eagerness for that change. So there is a kind of cliche of surfing the waves rather than being under the wave, and beyond that cliche, it is a bit of that. It's it's noticing that nothing is permanent. It's being able to be kind of joyful about the impermanence, not just the impermanence of life, but the impermanence of my role, the impermanence of my position in the company, the impermanence of my company, the impermanence of our industry today, and just seeing that it's a constant process of change. So I hope they come away with more lightness and joy about those changes.
Mm. There's so much around journey, around growth, around curiosity and humility,
Yeah,
in what you've described there. Just yeah.
yeah.
What strikes me the most, Denise, is that you combine a number of different paradigms. Kind of the programming element and the logic and the drive. So you can talk that language, and yet you have this. real wisdom in connection, in how people work together, and how people work internally as well. It's incredible, and I wonder, what combination of experiences in your life have brought that together. But
Oh
you're,
my.
yeah, it's an absolute honor to have shared this time with you.
Oh,
Really.
thank you. Thank you very much. I'm very touched. Now, there's a powerful question. I don't know what's brought that on. I'm going to think about that. But yeah, thank you very much. I do see that mix of paradigms, and I think that's what makes it easier for senior executives that I work with to connect with those more human elements, is that it's not coming from a touchy-feely kind of woo-woo space. It's
Yeah,
coming from a space that they understand,
yeah,
but it then can go very deep into these things.
yeah, yeah.
Um, yeah.
No, what a gift! What a gift indeed.
Well, thank
Um,
you.
so, for anyone who's curious about exploring this further, obviously the book is the next first step. So the book, The Eagle That Drank Hummingbird Nectar. But how else can people follow your work?
My website, it's just www.aneace.com, Aneace, just my first name.com. Um, there's everything there on my work, how to contact me, the links to LinkedIn, link to the book, everything is there. And I've got such a differently spelled first name, unique to the first name, that I was able to get the website for it. So that's where it is.
More gifts from your parents.
Yeah. Let's spell his name in a really weird way that nobody can figure out. That way he can get a website when he's all grown up.
Oh, actually, now I need Clareland. I need to get a metaverse area that's Clareland before anybody else does. My husband would say that already exists. My son would say it's full of unicorns and rainbows. But there we go. There we go. Danny, thank you. And for everybody who's out there, I really do encourage you to just to immerse yourself. I was going to dive in, but that's not quite the right word. Immerse yourself in this energy and the spirit that Aneace brings, because there's some real depth in there, and a genuine desire to help you to connect, yeah, really, to who you are and how you grow, and to show up in a much more potent, resilient, confident way.
It's beautiful.
So
Thank you.
yeah. So um, so if you've enjoyed today, keep in touch, and like, share, send to people, subscribe, shout from the hilltops about how wonderful we are. Um, just get involved, and keep tuning in. This month we're looking at all aspects of leadership, and some of the challenges that are faced by many people who take on the mantle, even if they don't always recognise it. So, Aneace, thank you for being here
Thank you,
on this
Claire.
planet right now. It's an
Thank
absolute
you very
delight.
much. It was beautiful. Thank you.
Take care.